Anytime that you work on a ride at a theme park, you're going to get a lot of training. Rhino Rally was no exception, and it had some very unique elements to it. Rhino Rally was my very first job at a theme park I had ever done. Absolutely loved my time working at Busch Gardens. One of the things I quickly learned working there was the emphasis on safety and how much training we went through. I actually trained on one of the roller coasters right before I got to work on Rhino Rally, and the type of training was actually radically different over at Rhino Rally. There were just so many other elements to it that you didn't have at a normal ride. It was really kind of neat to be able to go through the whole training process from day one all the way through. So I kind of wanted to walk you through what it was like to train as a Rhino Rally driver. Now, it has been 15 years since I initially got my job and worked at Rhino Rally at Busch Gardens. So there are probably some parts, just because of the passage of time, where my memory's a little on the fuzzy side. If I get something slightly inaccurate here, for those who also drove, please don't hesitate to give me a correction in the description. I should be generally accurate on this. If I'm missing something, it's going to be very minor. One of the first things you get when you go to any theme park to work is you get their orientation. At Disney, it's called Traditions, and everybody's very familiar with that. But every theme park has it. The Cedar Fair parks do, the Six Flags parks, and Busch Gardens is absolutely no exception to that. And in fact, when you go to work at Busch Gardens, they call it Cornerstones. And yes, I do actually still have my whole book from it. Now, at Disney, you have what's called the 5 Keys to the Kingdom. At Busch, at the time, it was 4. So safety, quality, memorable, and easy. That was kind of their keys, and they wanted you to drill in and remember all that. And now, some of this is still proprietary information, so I can't show all of it. But it's your welcome packet, and you get all your legal stuff and all your paperwork done, and your fun things like the dispute resolution policy and all of that kind of stuff. That's generally a whole day for orientation. And so you get to go through all of that and just have fun. Hopefully you have fun. They try to make it fun, but it's also where you get the dreary,
"This is what it's like to work a job"
kind of thing. So, yeah, by the time you're done with that, it's like, that was nice. I'm done. You're kind of happy to be done. They do also give you a letter at it, and this is actually my initial welcome letter from my first day at Rhino Rally. And it tells you where you're going to park, how you're going to get there, how to make sure you get your uniform, your costume. Make sure, in their case, you have your shoes before you go, because they won't let you get your costume without your shoes. And first day even has a little map on the back that tells you where to park, because Busch Gardens backstage area can be a little confusing if you haven't been there before. So it's a nice little welcome letter. And then your first actual day at your spot, once they let you know where to go, is you get to sit down in the break room at Rhino Rally. And if you were looking out from the loading platform, the break room was that room right across where you got on to the trucks. And you can see some trucks hand parked in a half circle around it. And I'm calling them trucks. They're technically Land Rovers. And your first couple of days on your job is this. This is what you get to do for a couple days, is read through all of the different park operation stuff and just learn about everything that you are supposed to know about working at Busch Gardens. So there is that book, and then there is also the Park Operations Employee Handbook. Yep, 2 days of going through books, reading chapters with your trainers, sitting down at a picnic bench and going over them, meeting people you're going to be working with, reading the books some more, doing a test, reading some books, walking out into the park a little bit to see how this is actually lived out. We did a walking tour of the park in the backstage area, so we knew where things were, and then it's sitting back down with the books again. Trying to make sure we understand all of this stuff before we ever actually go into the park and use it. Because if you don't know the procedures and rules, it's kind of hard to enforce them. And let alone let the guests know what they are. So that was a lot of it. And then we finally got to actually go over to the Land Rovers. The Land Rovers are interesting in that they are large 16-passenger vehicles. If you're going to typically drive them on an American road, you'd actually have to have a commercial driver's license because of the number of passengers and because of the size, because they're big. But because we're driving them essentially on private property and not on public roads, we didn't have to have that. So you had 4 rows of 4, and then you had the driver compartment up on the right side and the passenger on the left. That's right, the driver's on the right in these, not on the left side. 2 reasons for that. One, Land Rover is a British company, and in Britain they actually drive on the opposite side of the road than we do. So they are actually using British Land Rover specifications. These are legit Land Rovers. They're slightly modified for the ride, but they're actually not that far off of what a regular Land Rover is. The other deal, too, was because of where the passengers were getting in. Now, I guess they could have kind of flipped the whole course backwards and put the passengers getting in on the right side, but with the way they laid it out, they decided to have the passengers get in and out on the left, leave the driver compartment where it is. It is a little different when you are driving that Land Rover on the other side. They take you, give you a very nice walk around to the vehicle, get you acquainted with the vehicle, and then it's more books. And yes, these books basically go through how you were supposed to operate the ride, how you're supposed to run it, what the people that are standing on the land platform do, what your exit procedures are, what your boarding procedures are, what the ride requirements are, and all of that kind of stuff. And actually, what's kind of neat about these operating manual books is they actually, I think I can get away fairly with showing you this, they actually have a whole stat page that tells you all about the ride, how long it is, how many vehicles, how many people it's supposed to handle, and that kind of stuff. And then all the ways that you're supposed to be able to operate it and operate it safely. So who's allowed on, who's not, and things like that. So yes, more book work. While you're doing this one, after you learn some basics, then they will actually start letting you load some people or unload some people and learning the different hand signals and getting started to use them, as well as man the front gate. So at this point, you're actually getting to put them into practice a little bit. Over at the unload station, we use hand signals. And you would actually be standing in a little fenced area, and you would have to reach way out to let people driving the Land Rovers know whether it was okay to come in. And a thumbs up was good, and a thumbs up was stop the Land Rover. I don't care what you're doing, stop, because there may be somebody walking across or something has happened. So this was a no-go, this was a go. The only problem that we had was sometimes if you're driving the Land Rover and the weather's iffy, it's a little hard to see this from a distance. So we would try to make it apparent what we were doing, try to make it clear so that way there was no confusion. You could usually tell if somebody's hand was up or down, but that was what we were looking for. Same thing when we were pulling in to load to load the Land Rovers. You were always watching for the person at the load positions to give you a clear signal. And if you didn't have a thumbs up, even if it was kind of sideways or whatever, if you couldn't tell if it was thumbs up, you didn't move. No. And so you had to make sure that you were giving proper signals to the driver so they knew whether they could go or not. And you also learned when it was safe to cross. Because our break room was essentially on the other side of the loading and unloading area, if we were going to a break from the platforms or coming back from a break, we always made sure that we would have to stand on the side until we got a clear also from the unload area, because we kind of walk in between. We were having to watch the Land Rovers, and again, you didn't move till you got a clear from the platform that you were actually going to be able to cross and not have to worry about getting in the way of anything. So you learned all of those procedures. And then you finally get in the Land Rover. And you don't get to actually drive the ride. Nope, not yet. You first learn how to inspect it, and then the trainees kind of ride together, at least we did. We had 2 or 3 of us that were all learning, and we would get 1 or 2 hour shifts driving, and then we would switch and rotate out. Driving backstage. So we would drive around the access roads. We would drive around the parking lots in the back. We would drive past the cafeteria, past the veterinary area, all the way up to the train barn and the roundhouse, and then around behind the sky ride, and and just around and around and around. And we had to do that for so many hours. I want to say we were supposed to have like 8 hours of driving training. 8 or 10, something like that. Which meant you spent more than a full day just driving the Land Rover around backstage And that's all you did. They weren't exactly real exciting days, so we would bring along little pocket radios, and we would try to listen to some music, and we talk with the trainer, and we get to learn more about the park too. And oh yeah, those books, we'd be reviewing those while we rode along as well. So it was still constant training. And then after you finally had all that time driving backstage, and I might have the hours off a little bit, it may have been only 8 hours, but then you got to start driving the course without passengers. And you had to get so much time driving on the course itself without passengers to get used to that and be able to have the feel of the Land Rover and where you stopped and started and how fast to go. And then by that point too, that's when you started working on this book. Yes, lots of books. You would start working on the script and the animal facts. Even during the first part when you were backstage, you were trying to work on this. And then once you started on the course, you had so much time with your trainer that you would just start trying to learn how to spiel. And if we weren't spieling, then we were trying to ride along with other people if there was empty seats to listen to them spiel and how they would do it. So if we were driving, typically it would be one trainee and one trainer in the Land Rover. Sometimes you get two in there. Every now and then the other employees on break might hop in just to listen to you and see how you're doing, give you some advice. But for the most part, it was the trainer and the trainee just going round and round. So you got to know each other pretty good there. Huh, Anson? Anson will probably remember. I got to know Anson real well. And at that point, they're listening to your spiel and making sure that you know how to do it. They're also trying to make sure that you're going to be safe, that you understand the obstacles that are in the way. So if you're going past the Rhino, you know how to actually drive past the Rhino and not distract him or get his attention or upset him. In particular, when you crossed the bridge to start the ride and then went into the elephants, you had to make sure that you went far enough before you turned, because otherwise there were some concrete rocks there. And if you weren't careful and weren't paying attention, you could hit the rocks pretty easily. The sad thing is, if you hit the rocks like I did once, which I do actually talk about in another video, you can actually end up with more training. And if you actually look at the bottom of this thing, they called it a serious safety violation. Let's see. George will receive a serious safety and 6 hours of retraining. What does 6 hours of retraining mean? 6 more hours of driving the Land Rover around and around to make sure you don't hit anything. Oh yeah, that was fun. And that was just because as I turned, I scraped a concrete rock with the steel siding on the side of the Land Rover, and he made a real nice noise. It sounded much worse than it was. You hit that thing, it was like, scratch! It was freaky sounding, and it was evening. Yeah, I scared everybody pretty good, including myself. For really something that just left some scratches. 6 hours of training for that. And we would have to constantly refine the training sometimes, depending upon what happened. I was the first one to have an accident backstage with the Land Rover that wasn't my fault, and I still blame the other guy. But then I ended up having to do retraining from that because of everything that happened, and got to drive around backstage for hours again. That was messed up. As far as they were concerned, I should have gotten fired for that one, and I still blame them because it was a stupid kid in the camp truck behind me. But that's a whole nother thing, and that's also in another video. In any case, after you had done all of this training, all of this driving, so it was like 15, 20 hours of driving. I want to say close to 15. That you had been driving and learning the rules and signing the stuff off as you went. So you drive for a couple hours, take a lunch break. That was kind of nice. We would drive the Land Rover over to the employee cafeteria and back, park the Land Rover there, go in and eat, and then get back in and start driving. But we're constantly reviewing and testing and spieling and trying to get all of that down. Then finally, after all of that, then the manager or one of the lead trainers hops into the Land Rover with you. And you get to do the whole spiel as if you had guests in the Land Rover. Drive them around, spiel everything, make sure you're doing everything right. Driving onto the breakaway bridge properly. Driving off of the breakaway bridge when you get back done. Making sure you do all of that right before they'll let you do it. Oh, and then there was one other thing too that most people don't know about. The evacuation procedures. You actually have to go through a whole procedure in case of an evacuation. And at Rhino Rally with our water portion, we would have evacs sometimes, because you'd get a Land Rover out in the water and the machines would break down, or somebody had tried to stand up in the Land Rover or something. And occasionally we would have Land Rovers that would be in the middle of the water portion, and the water portion would have to get shut down, and then we'd have to go out and get the passengers off. Well, this is where you learn about lockout tagouts, where every employee that's going out to do an evacuation gets a padlock of their own with a key that only they can use. So you would grab a padlock with a key, unlock the lock, put the key on your arm so you kept it with you, and then you would actually put your padlock on the power board, and that way the ride could not be powered up. They couldn't start it or run it at all as long as your padlock was on there. And then you would go out and help the passengers off, evacuate them, get them back, and then when everything was all done, you were all cleared, everybody was done, then you could go back with the rest of your coworkers and unlock your lock from the power box, pull your padlock off, and then you put it away, and then they could actually operate the ride again. This was to make sure that there weren't any employees out there if the ride was operating. Because if you were out there, then you had the power box locked down. And if you weren't out there, then there was no padlocks. It was just a safety feature to help make sure you didn't do something dumb and risk somebody's life. And that's pretty much what training at Rhino Rally was. After you got through all that, then you finally got your first load of passengers and you were ready to go. Oh, how happy we were when we got... That first one was always scary. It's like, oh my goodness, I got real people. Here we go. And then after you did that a couple times, you realized you were good to go. That's a little look back at what training was like at Rhino Rally. Similar to other rides, but different. If you've trained on a ride or something, I'd love to hear your comments about it and how it was the same, how it was different. The train actually at Silver Dollar City was similar in a lot of ways too. So I'd love to hear your stories, your feedback, your comments, your questions. Did I miss something and not tell you something you want to know? Please let me know. I also want to give a huge shout out to my patrons. Thank you to your financial support. I had 2 new patrons join me last month in the midst of all my travel. So I want to give a huge shout out to Joseph Anderson. Thank you for your support, Joseph. And to Julie Long. I couldn't do what I do without my patrons. They help make all of this and so much more possible. So thank you to my patrons. Thank you to you for watching as well. Please don't forget to hit like and share, comment below. Let me know what you think. If you haven't subscribed yet, well, do that. And check that description below too. There's a ton of information there about merchandise and fan pages and places to send me questions and feedback and all kinds of stuff like that. Thank you so very much for watching and God bless. This is Rhino Rally training with a fan cord under my foot. Now, the Land Rovers are interesting in that they are, yeah, just toss the books aside, and where you stopped and if you'd like to know about my merchandise, fan pages, and more, be sure to check the description below. If you'd like to know whenever I've got a new video posted, well, make sure you hit that button right up there and subscribe. If you'd like to watch another one of my videos, I've got a great one for you right here. And if you'd like to be like these wonderful people here and support me financially on Patreon, well, make sure you check the link right there. There's even some extra perks for them. Thank you so much and God bless.